The following is a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio. Keep your mission on your mind and your mind on your mission. This is Mission Minded with Michael Coleman.
Welcome back to another Mission Minded, where I just learned that A1 does not mean AI. That's where you're talking to someone about AI, and you keep writing A1, and you keep talking about steak sauce. They're like, what the hell are you talking about, steak sauce in business? He's Michael Coleman, CEO of the Heart of Alabama Food Bank. I am Tony Curry. And, I just took a couple of days off, so that's probably why my brain's a little scrambled. I'm 58 years old, and I don't even know where I'm at. But, Michael, thank you so much for being on with us. Of course, Mission Mind, we've been doing this for a couple of years. Fantastic show. One of our most listened to shows. And it's funny because I look at the numbers, and they kind of peak and they dip. And we do this show every single week, and we're getting a good little P1. I do know what that is. It's not PI. That's a P1. I know what a P1 is, and that is a loyal listener. And a lot of people do that. We got some emails we'll get into, but you want to share a couple of stories. First of all, how are you doing? I'm going to drop pleasantries to make it look like we love each other like we do. And then you got an interesting story you want to share with us today.
Yeah, it's one of my all-time favorites, and doing well. My wife is a school teacher, K4, and so she's going back to school today. Today is her first day back. And so I've been thinking about her. And
can I ask you a question real quick?
Sure.
I know how it is as a parent. I know how it is when my kids go back to school. It used to be I couldn't wait for my kids to go back to school because I've got 8-9 hours during the day to do whatever I want. And then I'm realizing down here with school starting so early, it actually makes it more difficult sometimes when your kids are back to school. So I know as a parent how I feel. What's it like being married to a teacher in this day and age of teaching and knowing all the challenges she's got to? And when she ramps up and gets ready to go back to school, does she have anxiety? Does she have issues like that too?
She does every year. And it's really interesting because usually she'll start a year and, she'll have some kids that she really loves. And I mean, she loves all the kids, but there'll be some that are just holy terrors. And today, in today's world, especially goes to a private school. So there's so much competition for K4 and K5. And Alabama really has one of the top, if not the top, early learning K4 programs in the nation, and has for years now. And so there's a lot of competition with private schools. Private schools try to get you in K3, K4, K5, and then kind of getting that flow where you like, oh, I don't want to take them out of this environment, and so they give you a lot of leeway, and that's really tough on teachers. I mean, I understand it just from an economic standpoint, but my wife has had, students swing at her, scream at her, throw things at her, and then the parents are, how parents are, they just so different than I did. I mean, if a teacher told me my daughter, I wouldn't, they didn't tell me twice, I'd come up, I wouldn't, they knew I was going to side with the teacher every time.
Yep.
And that's not always fair. I get it, but more times than not, you're getting the adult perspective versus your child's perspective.
No doubt.
But anyway, so she battles that every year, but by the end of the year, she really is saddened by having to the kids going into the summertime. She's not going to see them every day. She really loves them. She's really gifted.
That's great, man.
In that way. And then she starts over again, and it's anxiety about going back and, picking up what each child is going to be. And she knows some will be very high on the learning scale. Some will be very low. Even at K4, all that's kind of measured now. She has to do assessments on all of them. But anyway, it usually takes a few weeks for her to get in the swing of things. And then she kind of gets into a little routine and where they know what to expect every morning when they come in. The ones that cry every morning for their moms, they usually work through that by week 3 or 4. So they kind of get settled in and,
Well, I put teachers right up there with first responders and police officers and firefighters, armed forces. I do. They're.
Both my daughters are teachers. My other daughter teaches 6th grade, which is a tough grade anyway, but she's at a little small school in Butler County. It's the only school, McKenzie, that's gotten an A rating in that college. I mean, excuse me, in that county. But she has this year, first time she's doing this, she has both fifth graders and sixth graders in her class all day. And they are at the lower end. And so there's not as many. I think there's 17 total. But she's having to teach like half this class, and the other half she's having to teach them. And it's, matter of fact, just yesterday she walked me through it. My head was spinning like how you juggle that. And first of all, I've told my wife before, I have visited her at school and I'm standing there with all those kids. It doesn't bother her a bit in the world. And I'm like, if I don't leave here, they're going to put me under the prison because I'm going to commit homicide if I don't get away from these kids. I mean, I don't understand how people do it all day long. But anyway, so it's a big day for her.
Good.
And yeah, I mentioned this to you last week that it's one of my all-time favorite stories. I don't know, I couldn't remember if I had told it over this, but it's really two stories, but they connect at some point. And so I'll tell them separately. But it's really speaks to me about the whole idea about, well, there's just so many lessons you could pull out, but one of the key ones is about the impact you have on others, and sometimes taking the harder path in life. We as humans kind of tend to be like electricity, follow the path of least resistance. And the more struggles you have in life, we certainly understand that. But there was a man, most of our audience will probably remember, at least in name, a man named Al Capone. Al Capone, was in Chicago, rural Chicago, back in the 20s and 30s. And of course, he was a mobster, but he ruled with intimidation. It was very difficult for people to bring him down, as all sorts of people were after him. And he had an ally that was part of his group, a man named that they called Easy Eddie. And Easy Eddie was an attorney. For years, I was thinking in my mind, I went back and read the story, but for years I was thinking he was a bookkeeper. I think he handled some of the books, but he was a master at getting Capone out of difficult situations. And we all know slick talking lawyers. If you're walking on the edge of ethics in your business, that's the kind of guy you want. So Capone really saw how valuable he was. So he put him in this huge mansion, almost the size of Capone's compound. And it was a fenced-in community. He had the best of everything. I mean, he was like a protected guy. I mean, he was so valuable. And so he enjoyed all the comforts of that time that you could. But there's one thing that he loved more than all that was a son. And so he realized that the life that he was living and the values that he was trying to teach his son was different than what he was doing. So he saw this real hypocrisy in his own life, and he just loved his son so much. He said, it's really important to me to set the right example. So he started having this really just weighing on his conscience and saying, hey, I'm going to have to make some changes. And that means I'm going to have to end up leaving behind the comforts of this world. But it was more than just leaving behind the comforts of this world. He knew that if he walked away from Al Capone, he was the man that knew literally where all the bodies were buried. And Capone wasn't going to let him live. I mean, he knew this, and he's like, I just have to be able to make that commitment and do that anyway. And so he tells Capone he's leaving, and sure enough, he's gunned down in the streets of Chicago. And there was a poem that was found in his pocket. And the poem, I'll read the poem. The clock of life is wound but once, and no man has the power to tell just when the hands will stop at late or early hour. Now is the only time you own. So live and love and toil with will and place no faith in time, for the clock may soon be still. He saw his time as and his commitment to his son, and he knew each day wasn't promised. He knew he was likely going to be gunned down, and sure enough, it was. But it's such an amazing commitment, not just the walking away from the conveniences and the protections of the life that day. I could see most people would probably say, "Well, I'll shield my son from these things. I'll teach him a different." But he just saw that such inconsistency, and he went and did that, and it cost him his life. Well, there's another story that's connected to that about a man named Butch O'Hare, and Butch O'Hare was a World War II fighter pilot, and he was in the Pacific, and he was going out one day on a flight, and I want to say there were 5, maybe 6 aircraft that went out. And when he went, they were going out, and he happened to look down and notice that his aircraft was almost empty of gas. It was like, hey, I gotta, it was low. He wasn't gonna have to go all the way out where they were and come back. So he just told him, he radioed him and said, "Hey, I'm got to turn around. I've got to go back." Well, when he did, he ran into a squadron of Japanese aircraft that were fixing to attack the place where they just left. And so he single-handedly took on these aircraft. I said it was 6. It was more than that. I think that's how many he ended up taking down himself. He became the World War II's first fighter ace. They talked about that even after he ran out of ammunition, he was diving into those aircraft, trying to do anything. Like he would kamikaze it if that's what it took, but he was doing anything. And finally, what was left of that squadron flew away, but he saved all his people on the ground and fought, and he came back, and the plane barely made it back. I mean, it had holes in it, and it was and he won Medal of Honor, and was the first ace fighter pilot in World War II. And his name is Butch O'Hare. His real name is William Butch O'Hare. And if you go to Chicago Airport, which we all know is O'Hare Airport, it's named after William Butch O'Hare. But the more interesting piece to that is Butch O'Hare is the son of Easy Eddie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you see, it even brings more importance to the story that here's a man who gave his life, and subsequently that fed down to a child who grew up loving his country, had such bravery. Unfortunately, Butch O'Hare was killed later in a dogfight, and he lost his life at age 29. So he did all that while he was still in his 20s.
Wow.
But it's an amazing story, and it's an amazing connection. Who knows what Butch O'Hare would have been or turned into? He may have followed in his father's footsteps. But I encourage people, even when they've gone down a wrong path in life, that it is absolutely never too late to change what you're doing. It's never too late to start a new path. And it's amazing the kind of influence and impact you can have on people's lives, from your children to your friends, neighbors, people you interact with, when they see that you are committed to doing, what's right and being the best version of you can be.
That's a wonderful story, and a lot to handle, a lot to take in. We're both in our 50s, and I've had some pretty interesting conversations over breakfast, man to man, and as you get older, you certainly start thinking about these things. You start reading these poems, you start hearing these stories, and there's a reason why you don't hear them in your 20s. You probably don't need to hear them in your 20s yet because they don't mean as much to you.
Right.
But there still is a sense of invincibility in all of us that I'm 50. I just told you a few minutes ago that my body hurt a lot, and I was like, what am I going to be like in 20 years? Well, hell, I'm
Yeah.
78. I don't know if I'm going to make it 20 years.
Yeah.
I may not make it till 10 o'clock tonight. I don't know. Unfortunately, I guess we don't know when we're going to go. So we are forced to fixate on what we have at task. The one thing I'll say this, and I've learned this a lot by surrendering my life and my faith to Jesus Christ and my Savior. Um, Once I give that up to Him, and it's a battle, right? I'll give it up,
Sure.
and I'll be having a great run, and things will be falling in place and going. And as things fall in place, I'll start taking some things back, and next thing you know, it blows up in my face, right? And then I have to
Sure.
surrender it again. Um, I do think it's just really important. God put me on this earth to live this life that He's given me. I've been chosen. I'm not a random number. We've all been chosen to be on this earth for a reason. We all have a purpose. We all have gifts. And if you weren't born, then you weren't chosen to be here. So I know that I'm special. I know that I was built in His likeness, and I know that He's perfect. And I believe that, and He wants. Jesus prays for me. People pray to
Yeah.
Jesus, but people don't realize that Jesus prays for us every day. He prays for us. I mean, like there's special people in my life where I know that if they pray for me, it's going to help me because and you're one of them. Because I know how close you are to your faith and to your Lord and Savior. And so when I'm like, hey, drop a prayer for me, or I'll call you and say, can you say a prayer for me? I've certainly been through some things like we all have. And,
Sure.
and, and to know that Jesus is doing that for us every single day is not something I take lightly. But I always try to remember. I just try not to take things too seriously in life.
Yeah.
We just chaos, turmoil, drama, all these things that bog us, worrying, concern, things that just bog us down in our lives. I just try to kind of let that stuff float away. I try to keep
Well,
my side.
it's
Yeah.
especially important now during the election
Oh man, I mean, it's
because
just
we tend to get so wrapped up as if some people think Kamala Harris will be the savior. Some think Donald Trump will be
mm,
the savior. We really need to see beyond politics and recognize
there's only
that,
one.
yeah,
There's only one. I went to confession several weeks ago at OLD. Father Kelly is our priest. He's a death priest. He's amazing. Does great homilies. And I came in, professed my sins, and my reconciliation was to pray for our politicians. I said, "What?" And he goes, "Pray for our politicians." He goes, "That's what I want you to do. I want you to go back in the church. I want you to pray for our politicians. Politics in this country are. It's not the end of the world, but it's certainly pointing in that direction. We're either getting better, or you're getting worse. We're not staying in one place." And he said,
yeah,
it's getting worse. He says, I'm directing everyone to pray for and we say that in church, pray for our politicians.
sure,
Because I think politics is really turned into something that's it got really, really nasty. And it's certainly not the way it used to be back in the times when I was talking to Kip Kiefer on Need to Know earlier today. And I said, man, I wonder if I'm going to be able to vote for a president I actually like before I die. It
yeah.
hasn't happened yet. There hasn't been
Politics
one.
are
There hasn't
are
been one where
really
I'm,
a nasty game right now.
now maybe after so, and I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want to stir anything up. But certainly after a president had served, I thought you did a pretty nice job. I kind of like that. That was pretty good. Um, but I as a 58-year-old, I can't remember a person where I thought, man, I want this guy to win because I think he'll make a huge difference.
Yeah,
It just takes so much. There's so much collateralism. There's just so much stuff that you have to do to work through to get anything passed. Because just because you're the president doesn't mean you're going to get anything done. And I always thought 4 years wasn't enough time because it takes that long to kind of get off the ground. Um, and so, but it's a great story.
well, it kind of brings up what you just mentioned with one of the emails that we got about the AI.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
Bring it,
we
read that, and
yeah,
then we'll talk about that, because that's a lot of the problems right now that the political camps are going back and
no
forth on.
doubt. Email from Dan in Birmingham. There's a new CNN poll that just came out that found out that most customers don't like the AI label associated with anything. For example, if you have two vacuum cleaners and you say, this one's got the latest AI technology, blah, 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 and this one just sucks really good, they're going to get the one that sucks really good. They don't like that AI thing. And now AI is clamped onto everything. And I'm trying to, and I've even used that with you. I'm like, how are you utilizing AI? I'm like, how would part of Alabama Food Bank be utilizing AI? There's a way to utilize AI in so many different ways. It could be writing, your new marketing campaign, or it
Yeah.
could be something that you're using for your books. There's all
That's right.
kinds of different ways to do that. I do think it's an amazing technology. I do think it's really slippery, much like the internet. I think if it's used right, I think it could be an amazing thing and very useful. But I also see the negative sides of it. And I think a lot of people, at least people my age, who aren't forward thinking, we may be purist or however you want to explain us. We like a simpler life. We like to sit on the front porch and drink our sweet tea.
Yeah.
AI scares the hell out of us because we don't understand it fully. It's like Bitcoin. I don't understand it. I don't get it. I've read all about it. I know how it works, but I still don't understand why you wouldn't want cold hard cash instead of Bitcoin. I don't understand that. So
Yeah.
explain why some people would be
It's
scared by
interesting
AI.
that I saw something in the last couple of weeks that it was a quote from Einstein. Um, I think it was in 1949 that he said soon, and he was alluding to the fact that all the media will be owned by rich people. He said, you will not be able to know or whether what you're reading or not is true. I think that's in one of the negatives to AI is right now you see the campaigns going, Trump saying, oh, her crowd figures are AI generated. And they're saying, no, it's real. And so there's these accusations, but just saying it's AI can cast doubt on it. And that's something that just simply didn't exist before. You could Photoshop, but even, 20 years ago, that wasn't, those kind of things weren't a possibility. But now I can type in Donald Trump, create a large crowd. I could generate my own view of that and claim that I was there. And so it is very difficult sometimes when you're reading something to verify and validate whether that's true. And that can be very frustrating, especially if you're interested in the news, you're interested in what's happening, and you're just trying to keep up. You're not coming at it from a particular agenda. You're just wanting to know, just give me the facts that are out there, and you're wading through, and you can't tell what's the truth or not. I think on the other side of that, though, I think a real disservice has been done, because right from the very beginning, when we started talking about AI, and people were like just completely open slates, they didn't know anything about it, what it really involved. And then you had these doomsdayers come out going, oh, well, yeah, we're going to get AI involved, and all of a sudden we're going to lose control of the world, and the computers are going to kill all humanity. The sky's falling, worst case scenario, all that kind of stuff. And so a lot of people shut down and just classified AI as bad.
Yeah.
And of course, none of that is at least my understanding, even when I've listened to really smart people with AI, which I am not. The idea that could happen is really, really remote. Now, I will say this, though. The things that AI does that it does wonderfully is it increases productivity. I've mentioned this on a previous show that there's so many times I'm having to write something, and or for me, it's always the most difficult just where to get started. It's like a writer's block. It's like, I know what I want to talk about, but just how do I get it started? And so sometimes I'll have my directors write something. I said, look, you write it. Let me just edit it and And what I found over time, it's much easier to edit somebody else's writings and to shape their writing. It doesn't require near as much creativity, near as much just, I've got to have, really lock in. Well, that's kind of what AI does. I've gone in before and gone, okay, I want to talk about this subject. AI write and it may only be like 150 words for a newsletter article. And I may say, hey, write me a 300-word essay on this topic. And I don't copy and paste because an AI is not going to write an article for the Heart of Alabama Food Bank in a way that it sounds like it comes from me.
Yeah.
But what it does is it hits on some key ideas and key concepts. And then I look at those concepts and go, yes, that is something I want to talk about, and take the concept and explore it. And it might even add something in there that's of interest or whatever. And so things like that, it is incredibly helpful when you look at it as a productivity tool. Creating pictures, I could go out on the internet and try to find a picture. It's not I'm trying to illustrate this picture is of this, but I just need an example of, a honeybee on a daisy getting, spreading pollen or whatever, a honeybee with pollen. And I could go out and look at and try to do it, or I could just create it on AI. Those kind of things is where it's very, very helpful. Nothing at all to be scared about. Now, but there's the whole psychology behind anything new can't be trusted. People are going to use this. People get scammed. I mean, all that's true. So I think no matter what you're talking about, you're going to have people on both sides of the argument. But if you just go back, I remember getting my first computer in 1994, my home computer, where I could get on the internet in 1994. And when that began to happen, people were starting to do that, but there were a lot of people, you couldn't get them to do anything on the computer.
Yeah.
They absolutely refused to. They're like, no, I'm a paper copy person. Well, it got to the point to where you just can't survive in business just doing paper copy.
Life will leave you behind. I mean, it will.
That's right. It absolutely will. And even when you're running like little shops, little mom and pop shops, you're going to have to be able to run a credit card. You're going to have to be able to do those kind of things. So I think there's a lot of holdouts, and I understand from a psychological perspective as to why the hesitancy. They don't want to jump in. They don't understand it. When they start trying to understand it, maybe it's too complicated with their level of understanding. And so it's just better to say, I don't want to clog my mind with it. I want to do it. But at some point down the road, it's not that they're going to have to choose AI, but AI is going to be a part of our browsers. AI is going to be a part of everything we're doing. And they may even use it without even always knowing it. So it's not going to be something you can avoid forever. You can avoid it for a while, but not forever.
You mentioned on the show, everything's done for convenience purposes. And it is convenient. And at first I thought to myself, why are we allowing something that is, we used to be able to pay $5-10 to have a report written for us in school. Remember those guys? Those kids would be $5-10. They'd write a report for you. And of course, the smart teachers knew that wasn't in your writing anywhere. It didn't look like your writing. You'd copy it, and you're like, I'd never say that. You change a couple of words, and like all of a sudden, you went from a C student to an A student in one paper. Come on,
not that you and I have experienced that personally.
No, we did not. But I remember being in radio when we didn't have the internet. And quite frankly, I don't know how you did sports radio without the internet. I mean, guys are looking up numbers, stats right now on the fly while they're talking, and it's made the content so much more better. It's so much more contentful. And yeah, believe it or not, I mean, try doing a show with no computer in front of you about something that generates, whether it's salaries, stats, whatever. I mean, it's
very difficult.
You have notes. The other thing is, I think when you're doing any type of computer generation of whether it's a crowd size or anything else, there's either the truth or it's lies. And I never really understood the whole Russian thing with Clinton, because I'm like, if you do your homework and you get online and you do some research, you'll find out what's true and what's not, And if I really want to see if Donald Trump had 35,000 people in Des Moines last night, I can pull up pictures or whatever. And yeah, there may be some false stuff out there, but for the people that are sending that stuff out there that are fake, some people are
Yeah.
doing it for fun, sometimes doing it for memes and things like that. But then the people that are generating these things just to fake us out, and to lure people that generally are smart with fake information, I think are about as guilty as the people that are actually putting these things on.
Yeah.
It's just, but you're right. It gets to the point now where this is where I found myself, where I have a hard time finding out what is true. I don't know anymore. I mean, you can computer generate a person's face with their mouth and they can say something, and you can make them say something, and you're like, I just saw it. And then you find out they didn't say it. And we're like, okay, well, what's real and what's not? And it's gotten so good. So that's the kind of stuff that, but that's,
Well, you're seeing exactly, and it's not just because of the wealth issue. And I understand why Einstein would have said that about the wealth, like, because he probably couldn't even imagine anything like we have in the palm of our hands. But yeah, this is the people who control the media or who control things like that and who put stuff out. Yeah, and there's so much from every social media platform, every news cycle is online. I mean, not news cycle, but every news outlet is online. And you're just bombarded with all this, and you're just trying to wade through it, just trying to understand what's going on in the world. Again, not trying to push one political agenda or next. This is not a right problem. This is not a political left problem. It's just, what do you do? Because I know both sides are taking advantage. If one side is being misrepresented, the other side will talk about it, because they're not going to let anything pass without it being used as a weapon, against their opponent. And right now, it's just something we're going to have to continue to keep our head down and push through. And with each passing year, more and more tools will be developed as to whether we can ensure that it's not manipulated.
Yeah, I always think about my presidential nominees as is this someone that I'd want my kid to hang out with? And is this someone that I would consider like a family member? I know that's kind of weird, but
well, that's been a while since I've had somebody like that.
I can't think of one. I mean, I can't. But I mean, would you consider letting your child sit on the lap of this individual? Would you be okay with your 9-year-old hanging out with Donald Trump for a day, or Joe Biden, or Kamala Harris, or anyone else? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
But I do know that the truth will set you free. We that is true, but we just don't know when we're going to know that truth. We're not sure when that's all going to come to fruition. But in the meantime, we have a lot of lies to sift through, and so it's up to us to figure it out. And if anything, it's made us more susceptible to being having the wool pulled over our eyes. But it's also made us know our political system better. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I didn't want to follow politics, and quite frankly, it makes me anxious. And I think a lot of people have been thinking about this, for 8 years now, thinking, okay, what's going to happen again? If these two knuckleheads end up running together, and obviously it's changed a lot over the last couple of weeks, but it's going to be interesting. Hey, great stuff, man. Keep your emails coming. info@TonyCurryRadio.net, info@TonyCurryRadio.net/Mission Minded. Put Mission Minded on there. It'll come right to his box, and we can read those. Otherwise, I could sift through all the shows. We can do that as well, but check it out. Michael, great stuff. Another show called Bite by Bite, which is going to be coming up next right here on TKR, wherever you get your favorite podcast. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, everybody.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.